From well before the establishment of the United Nations or the State of Israel, the Palestinians' goal has been clear: the annihilation of the Jews. Haj Amin Al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem and one of the founding fathers of Palestinian nationalism, worked hand in hand with Hitler to achieve this. The UN, the organization founded to prevent Nazi ideology from spreading, has committed itself to reinforcing modern-day Nazi jihadists. And today, breaking the Guinness World Record for rewarding terror, the UN now is in complete violation of its charter, is considering to force the establishment of a Palestinian terror state. Yes, to force it. If Hitler was alive today, he would be singing the UN's praises. Mr. President, from well before the establishment of the United Nations or the State of Israel, the Palestinians' goal has been clear: the annihilation of the Jews. Haj Amin Al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem and one of the founding fathers of Palestinian nationalism, worked hand in hand with Hitler to achieve this. And from then until today, the root of this conflict has not changed. It is not a political conflict or about partitioning land. It is solely about the destruction of Israel and the murder of Jews. Yet today, the UN refuses to see this, or prefers to act like an ostrich, burying its head in the ground out of distorted political interests. We just heard some of these political interests being expressed here on this stage. The UN was established in the wake of World War II to prevent atrocities such as the Holocaust. But the same genocidal ideology that this body was founded to combat is still prevalent among the Palestinians. What the Palestinians are indoctrinated with through their official media channels even, and what they are brainwashed with in their schools and educational materials is no different than the anti-Semitic propaganda in Nazi Germany's Der Stürmer. That's what they learn. You have to be blind not to see it. We all saw it in live action on October 7th when Hamas carried out their massacre. Hamas publicly states their affiliation with genocidal Jew hatred, and Hitler's Mein Kampf, his book, was found in many houses in Gaza. But you know, it's not only Hamas. Fatah and the Palestinian Authority refuse to recognize Israel's rights to exist as a Jewish state because they share the same genocidal ideology. President Abbas not only has not even condemned the October 7th massacre, the Palestinian Authority is paying monthly salaries to all the terrorists that took part in the October 7th massacre. All of them. The Palestinian terrorists, whether in Gaza or in Ramallah, seek one thing: the destruction of Israel, full destruction. Yet the UN, the organization founded to prevent Nazi ideology from spreading, has committed itself to reinforcing modern-day Nazi jihadists. And today, breaking the Guinness World Record for rewarding terror, the UN now is in complete violation of its charter, is considering to force the establishment of a Palestinian terror state. Yes, to force it. This won't be a regular state, I'm telling you. It will be a Palestinian Nazi state. An entity that achieved statehood despite being committed to terror and Israel's annihilation. If Hitler was alive today, he would be singing the UN's praises. And colleagues, if this happens, the UN will be remembered as a body that has been hijacked by dictators and human rights violators, a body that rewards Nazi-like monsters. Colleagues, yesterday we commemorated 6 months to the October 7th massacre. 6 months. Hamas carried out the most heinous and widespread massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Entire families were wiped from the earth, and peaceful communities were turned to ash. Israeli women were the victims of systemic rape, and over 250 hostages were taken by Hamas to Gaza. We even have with us in this very room a delegation of wounded soldiers who courageously battled this sheer evil in Gaza. These are true heroes who fought in defense of our future, and I salute them. Yet today we are not meeting to condemn the Hamas's atrocities. We are not meeting to condemn Hamas. We are meeting here for the sole reason that certain members of the Security Council, and you heard them, refused to even accept a condemnation to child-murdering rapists, and they vetoed it. What a disgrace. In a sane world, uncorrupted by despicable political interests, today, 6 months after the gates of hell were opened upon innocent Israelis, the UN would be holding a vigil for the victims, an international conference to secure the release of the hostages. Resolutions would be passed condemning Hamas. The Security Council would meet to designate Hamas as the terror organization that it is and sanction any country that aids, arms, and harbors these terrorists. But sadly, we don't live in a sane world, and the UN is more morally corrupt than ever. 6 months have passed since the massacre, and not a single UN body, not even one, not the General Assembly, the Security Council, or any other UN organ has even condemned Hamas. And not even one meeting has been dedicated to our hostages. It's insane. 1,200 Israelis murdered in the most barbaric ways, slaughtered like vermin. 133 hostages being held for 6 months. 6 months being beaten, tortured, abused, and raped. Rockets are raining down on Israeli towns and cities every day now, forcing millions to rush back and forth, forced to bomb shelters. Yet, to the UN, Israeli suffering means nothing. Nothing. Can you imagine if your daughter was Noah Argamani or Naama Levi? Beautiful girls held hostage by terrorists for half a year, enduring unspeakable horrors. What if your son was Ron Breslavsky, a courageous hero who spent hours saving others at the Nova Festival, Peace Festival, before being taken hostage by Hamas, and he's still there? What if your father was Amiram Cooper, a loving grandfather who was violently abducted to Gaza? By the way, Amiram is 84 years old. What kind of monsters kidnap an 84-year-old man? And you are all here silent? These are all people with stories, lives, and loved ones. And the UN has done nothing, absolutely nothing to ensure their release. Nothing. Shame on you. This body has forgotten the UN's founding purpose. So I will remind you, as it says in Article 1 of the UN Charter, and I quote, "The purpose of the United Nations are to maintain international peace and security, and to that end, to take effective collective measures for the prevention and removal of threats to peace and for the suppression of acts of aggression." Instead of removing threats, this body has spent the past 6 months pressuring threats and ignoring the gravest breach of peace: the innocent Israeli hostages held by rapist terrorists. You know that the Red Cross has not even visited them? Can you imagine? You did not establish a reporting mechanism for them. You did not demand that the Secretary General present a weekly outline of what he has done to advance their release. You have done zero. Zero. Why is this body so morally distorted? None of the resolutions adopted in this hall or in the Security Council conditioned a ceasefire on the release of the hostages. And it's clear why. Sorry again for the language. You don't give a damn about the Israeli hostages or Israeli lives at all. 6 months, and all the UN focuses on is the situation in Gaza and a ceasefire. Zero action has been taken for the sake of the hostages. Zero. And 100% dedication to aiding the mobs of Gazans who supported the Hamas Nazis and celebrated. We saw them, how they celebrated the kidnapping while publicly beating and spitting on the victims who were brought to Gaza. Ceasefire with no conditions is the UN's assurance that Hamas can regroup, rearm, and recommit October 7th, just as they have vowed to do. It is very telling that the first parties to praise the Security Council ceasefire resolution were, surprise, surprise, Hamas and the Ayatollah regime in Tehran, the number one state sponsor of terrorism. Because your policy is giving a carte blanche to genocidal jihadists. This is how low the UN has fallen. Colleagues, 6 months since the massacre, there are no vigils. There are no condemnations of Hamas, and the Security Council is busy, right now, busy discussing the recognition of a Palestinian Nazi state instead of designating Hamas as a terror organization. This will be the vilest reward of the vilest crimes. The Security Council is deliberating, granting the perpetrators and supporters of October 7th full membership status in the UN. We just heard it. The very fact that this discussion is even being held is already a victory for genocidal terror. Following 9/11, could anyone fathom giving Al-Qaeda international legitimacy and status? What's the next step? Considering the Islamic State, ISIS, for UN membership? 6 months after Hamas invaded Israel to rape, murder, and devastate, an atrocity 20 times bigger than 9/11, the UN sends a clear message to all the jihadist terrorists in the Palestinian Authority and around the world. Commit massacres and atrocities, and the UN will consider your demands, no matter how radical they are. What kind of sick, twisted logic is this? If the Security Council chooses to advance this prize for barbarism, it is no longer deserves to be called the Security Council. It shall forever be known as the Terror Council. Throughout history, there has been no greater reward for evil. Colleagues, let me remind everyone, the basic requirements for admission to the UN are: A, permanent population; B, defined government, defined territory; C, government; and D, capacity to enter relations with other states. And a very important principle that was stated in Article 4 of the UN Charter is, and I quote, membership in the United Nations is open to all peace-loving states. Peace-loving. Nothing is clearer than the fact that the Palestinians failed to meet these criteria.